Good morning. Is this one on? There we go. A little bit of an echo. Good morning, everyone. Do we have, Mike, would you be kind enough to do prayer this morning? Michael. Sorry. You take it very serious. Would you do prayer this morning? Do we have prayer requests this morning? I'll get my mouth working here in a moment. Yes. Your brother John? And what's going on?
He's in rehab in Amarillo.
Rehab in Amarillo? Okay. Anyone else?
Annette Ray is in rehab in Amarillo, same place.
Annette Ray?
My sister-in-law's going to have surgery Tuesday.
And your sister-in-law's name?
Pam.
Pam?
So we'll be
Okay.
in San Antonio. And then my sister's mother-in-law, her funeral is tomorrow.
Okay.
Brad Robertson.
A lot going on there. Anyone else?
We need to remember the Ferguson family. Charles's brother passed away this Friday.
The Ferguson family?
Ferguson's.
Fergusons.
Lawrence, his brother home.
Okay. His brother passed away. Anyone else?
My sister has
BBS.
VBS and your sister? Go ahead.
Her sister Janice,
Her sister Janice?
surgery this week.
Okay.
Tuesday.
Okay, for Tuesday. Anyone else? Last call. We got a big crowd this morning. That's good. I hope. Michael?
Heavenly Father, we humbly bow before you. We want to thank you for bringing us here safely today, so we can lift up your name and praise, learn more about you. Lord, help us to glorify you through this day, our week, and our lives. Lord, we ask you to be with our upcoming VBS. Help us to help that to be a success. Help us to be an example to this community. Lord, we ask you to be with Janice, John, Pam, Ferguson family. Watch over them and give them comfort. Give them the healing that they need in this time. Lord, we ask you to be with the teacher of this class and give him clarification, understanding, ability to teach us. Lord, we ask you to forgive us of our wrongdoings. Help us to do better in these things. Help us to reach out to a sorrowful nation, lead them to Christ. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. My family and I were up in Kansas last weekend. I wasn't here. I was sorry to miss out on Jeff's class for two reasons. One, I didn't know exactly where he was going to be leaving off. One, I just enjoyed Jeff's teaching so very much. He does such a great job. And I know that he left off in verse 8 of chapter 2? Is that correct? Okay, 9. I'm starting in 9. Is that correct? He left this one just for me. And I think this is probably a good thing because women's roles in the church are important to me. And that's a lot of what this has to do with. And I find it interesting that we're having this discussion on Father's Day. It's a good discussion to have on Father's Day, and there's a good reason for this. Some of you may know, or many of you may know, I grew up with an absent father. And because my father was absent the majority of my childhood, my mom had to take up that role. And I think that she did an exceptionally good job for what she was given. She had 4 kids. I'm the youngest of 4. I'm 4 years younger than my youngest sister. And that meant that I was not only the baby, but I was like really the baby. And my dad left when I was 4. So I watched my mother struggle throughout my childhood. And I watched her work very hard. And so today is gets a little bit emotional, but today is a good day for that. For this discussion. It says, likewise, I want women to adorn themselves with proper clothing, modestly and discreetly, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly garments. One of these things is, notice what this is saying, modestly. What is modesty in this context? What is Paul saying to Timothy? What does he describe modesty as? Discreetly? Okay. Why would he talk about adorn themselves with proper clothing? So what is proper clothing? Cover yourself. You're supposed to be clothed. Okay. Don't bring an overt amount of attention to what you're wearing. Okay. This is going to sound like ridiculous. Would you wear a wedding dress to church? I'm going for an extreme here. Would you wear a wedding dress to church? If you were the bride. Not for worship, though, right? Okay. When is the bride going to show up in her wedding dress? The day that she gets married. Any other day after that, it would probably be inappropriate, right? Would that be modesty if she wore it again? In the irregular assembly? Probably not. It'd bring an excess amount of attention to her. But again, why are we saying modesty? Okay, so there's 2 extremes here. Not enough and too much. Those are the 2 extremes. Supposed to be somewhere in the middle. It's interesting that the word modesty itself comes from the same basic word of moderation. Okay? What is moderation? I've always been told moderation is just enough. Okay? Not to, in this circumstances, it means enough, but not too much. It says discreetly. What is discreet? What does it mean by discreetly here? Self-control.
Can I just interrupt and ask what book you're in?
I'm in 1 Timothy chapter 2. I apologize. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 9. So discreetly, with moderation, with, being mindful of what the situation is. It says, not with braided hair. My wife has braided hair on this morning. Is that what it's talking about? What is this term? What is the point of this right here? Again, not drawing attention to yourself. But then again, what else do you have going on? I've seen some elaborately braided hair, but one of the things about that period of time is that the women would often braid their hair quite elaborately and would braid their hair with gold and silver laced into the braids. It was quite an elaborate hairdo. Time consuming, difficult to do, and also because they would weave things into their hair that were excessive. It says, and gold or pearls or costly garments. Now, why would we shy away from costly garments? First of all, what would be a costly, garment in the first century? Purple. Why is purple costly? I'm sorry? No, the purple came from particular dyes that were difficult to obtain. It required a lot, and those were expensive. That's the reason why purple was a royal color, is because it was difficult to do. Today, we don't think anything about the colors of our clothing because dyes are so prominent everywhere in our society that we don't think of it. Back in those days, if you wore something purple, it meant that you had some money. That was a costly garment.
Unduly draw attention to yourself, whatever.
Again, undue attention. And so all these things working together. So imagine she has costly clothing, she has pearls and gold and braided hair. It's about excess. Now, I'm going to talk to the husbands for a moment. Do you want your bride to be beautiful? I see yes. I see a couple nods. Come on, guys. Say yes, I want my bride to be beautiful. She should always be beautiful to you. There's nothing wrong with her being beautiful. So going into this, so we're talking about her coming into the assembly, adorning themselves with proper clothing, modestly, discreetly, not braided hair with gold and silver and pearls, costly garments. There's a lot to unpack here. Now, most of us in this congregation haven't had to deal with extreme poverty. Okay? And I think, so if I had you raise your hands, how many of you have had to deal with extreme poverty? I don't see any hands coming up except for my wife's. I know where my wife came from. Okay? We've been, she and I both grew up in families where we went without meals, where we went without proper clothing. How do you think you feel if you come into a congregation and you're a young woman and you haven't had a proper meal that day? You have the best thing on that you have, but it's still ragged. And you come into a congregation and everybody is dressed to the nines. How does that make you feel? Self-conscious? Unworthy? I don't belong here. One other thing. What do you think, Christina? I'm gonna pick it. Out of place? Okay. One of the things about it is if you come into an assembly and you have all these things, number one thing in my mind is they cannot relate to my situation. That's what you have to be careful of. These people can't relate to where I'm at today, right now. And Christine and I have both seen it in our lives where people can't relate. So all these things that seem like modesty, is actually about making other people feel comfortable in the assembly. It has very little to do with anything else, but allowing people to come into the assembly, and if they are not quite dressed right, that they're still loved and accepted. Okay? Our personal preference, again, going back to James chapter 2, actually it's James 1, I forget the verse, it's like 18, I think. James is talking about two people come into the assembly. You're going to look it up, aren't you? Two men come into the assembly. One is dressed to the nines, and he looks really good, and he's obviously wealthy. He has got rings on his fingers, okay? And another one comes in, and he's in rags and is smelling of work. What do? James is using this example because he says, the one comes in, he smells, and you say, here, sit at my feet. And the other one, you say, here, take this prominent place next to me. What have you become? What kind of judge? What's that?
It becomes judgmental.
Judgmental. It's important for us to treat one another correctly. Again, in James chapter 2, verse 8, what does that say? Love your neighbor as yourself. Somebody comes in regularly in rags. What do you know about that person? Are they just a slob? Not necessarily. You may think, oh, that person is sloppy. Look at the ragged clothes they're in every day. Maybe it is a choice, but perhaps it isn't. What have you done to change their situation? Again, I'm speaking not just to the ladies, but to the men here. We need to, as a whole, be conscious of what we're wearing and how we wear it and why. It says, as far as a woman's dress, it says, but rather by means of good works, as befits woman, making a claim to godliness. Now, there's a set of verses, in fact, there's a whole chapter, perhaps some of you know it, that addresses this very thing. Can any of you ladies tell me what chapter that is? Book, chapter, verse? Or book and chapter? No. Old Testament. What's that? Proverbs 31. Very good. What is it? What is Proverbs 31 talking about? The godly woman, the virtuous wife. What does she do? She makes sure that her family is fed, that her servants are fed and dressed. She makes sure that her family is fed. Is this a woman who is a woman of leisure who has servants taking care of her, or is she doing more than that? Speak up. Okay, one of the things that stands out is she goes and she looks at a piece of land and determines its value and purchases it. What kind of woman is going out to purchase a piece of land? Is she just a stay-at-home mom? Nothing wrong with stay-at-home mom, but is she just a stay-at-home mom? She isn't, is she? She's a businesswoman too. The people know her. The people know her husband. By her work, what is she able to do? She's able to have her husband sit at the gates as a judge. She is just as much a worker as he is. So, what are some of the good works that we see? You know, you mentioned John. What are some of the good works that we see women doing? What's that? Teaching, providing meals. What's that? Providing clothing. Taking care of the cat. My wife has done a lot of taking care of cats since we've been married. She's just rolling her eyes.
Does the laundry every 2 days or so?
Does the laundry. She makes sure that the house runs well. Because guys are pretty much naturally slobs. It's Father's Day, yep. Now, I'm getting to that. Okay. These are virtuous things that she is doing. What else does she make sure is done? I'm thinking about the church here. What are the roles within the church here in Sunray that are important, that the women take the most responsibility for? Older women are teaching the younger women. What else? Who's doing the bulk of this VBS? Come on. The women are. Who's taking these little kids the majority of the time for class? What is that sacrifice? When these young women take the kids back in class, what are they sacrificing? Being in class themselves? Okay. So there's a trade-off there, isn't there? They're serving rather than being served. And sometimes we overlook that. Is that important for women to do? Okay, why is it important for women to help bring up the kids in this community? You're special. You're able to take these situations, take these little kids, and love them like most of these guys cannot do. Women are nurturing.
Well, we wouldn't be here without the woman.
And that's the honest truth. Now, many of you know that I was part of a sunset program called Adventures in Missions back in 1993. This is the year that I got started. And one of the things that they had me do is they had me fill out a questionnaire. And it was from 1 to 10. And when it said teaching little kids, I said 0. Did not want to teach little kids. Guess what they did? My first assignment was with 90 some odd little kids from 10 years old down. There were 5 of us in that particular congregation to deal with 90 kids. I learned a lot. Number one, we had three girls, 2 guys in our group. And the girls were so good about making sure that we had things to do. One of the guys that I was there with, his name was Blaine Bell. Blaine was an excellent actor. So he brought the whole show alive, and and all the kids were like, well, they were looking at me like, well, what do you do? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing here. But the thing is I was the one that was able to bring the kids under control. That was my unique role. Is I was like, okay, let's quiet down. I guess I instilled more fear than Blaine did. But the ladies in our group did such a fine job of making sure that we had curriculum, because Blaine and I were lost. These ladies work hard to make sure that the church functions from day to day. So what are some of the some of the roles? So we have teachers, okay, encouragers. How many notes are written by the ladies all the time? Okay, what about the office work? The secretaries here are the unsung heroes of the congregation. And we start getting to other things.
Ladies multitask extremely well,
Yep.
whereas we don't tend to do that as well. Ladies can multitask extremely well. They seem to be very organized and just different gifts from up above. We're all very different gifts.
All these ladies have different gifts, and this is true. Sometimes it's just a word of encouragement. Sometimes it's a hug. Thank you for all the ladies that will give hugs. That means a lot to me, probably more than you know. All the guys that give hugs, appreciate you too. In verse 11, we start getting into a little bit more difficult things. This is about instruction. It says, let a woman quietly receive instruction with entire submissiveness. Any other versions in here other than New American Standard? Who has King James? Anyone have King James? New King James. Would you read that real quick?
Do I have to be the one to do it?
Yes.
Let a woman learn in silence with all submission. Do not permit a woman to teach, or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. And then it talks about Ave N.
But just verse 11, let a woman quietly receive instruction with entire submissiveness. Does that mean that a woman cannot say anything? No, sometimes more gets read into this than what's really there. There are situations where some women are more vocal than others. I'm okay, with them being vocal, but there are times when we're like, I'm trying to not tread on any toes too harshly. My wife and I was preaching in a little town in Missouri when we were first married. And one of the ladies there, she was an older lady, her father had been the minister in that congregation for a number of years, and then he became one of the elders. And then she felt, by virtue that her family had been there the longest, that she needed to be the elder. Notice how I put that. It wasn't an elder, it was the elder. And it created quite the amount of tension within the congregation. And when we came to this verse, because I had to teach on this verse with her, I said, look, number one, you're not the husband of one wife. You might be the wife of one husband, but you're not the husband of one wife. This is not the role that you need. Not only that, but eldership is a plurality. Okay? And you're not going to be the only one making the decisions. she wasn't interested in quiet submission, in understanding. She wasn't willing to have a man dominate over her, which I find interesting, because whenever we find God mentioned in the Bible, how is God mentioned? He. Okay. God is always mentioned as a male figure, as a dominant figure. One of the problems that we have is sometimes we have our own will, and I'm pointing to us guys as much as I am the ladies, our own will versus the will of God. What do we know about male leadership? What are some of the things that we know about male leadership? Well, not just in the church, but everywhere. They don't always lead like they should. Well stated, Joe. Thank you. Sometimes we have to be kicked into leadership, even in our own house. Am I wrong? She's giving me that look. The thing is the men need to be leading where they should, in all love and compassion. Submission to the husband. There are times when it's like, no, this is not the way this is going to happen in my house. This is the way it's going to be. God has already said that. This is the way it's going to be in his house. And it's not always fun, but it's about instruction. What kind of instruction should a woman receive? What was that? Loving. When you come in, well, let me back up. When you're teaching a portion of the Bible, how much study do you have to do on it? Quite a lot. Okay. Fortunately for me, even though I was unprepared today, compared to other days, I was expecting Jeff to be here. That's okay. I've already read Timothy about 5 times in the last 2 weeks. It only takes a few minutes. I know what's coming up. One of the things that I have had the advantage of is I've also sat in class for this book. In order for me to receive information from my instructors at Sunset in Bear Valley, what did I have to do as a man? I had to submit too. So is this anything that we're asking women to do more than a man? We all have to be submissive. It's difficult sometimes to do that quietly. It says, and Paul says this, but I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, but to remain quiet. Where did Paul get his authority? Speak. He got his authority from God. Who made Paul an apostle? Jesus. Okay, we went over this, didn't we? Who made Paul an apostle? So, one of the things that he has had to do in his books is he had to defend his apostleship. Because people were saying that he wasn't really one of the apostles because he wasn't with Jesus from the beginning. In our classes with, Christian evidences, in the New Testament church, this is one of the things that we have gone over with our Sunset work, is that Paul is an apostle. But if he says, I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, what does that mean? Is he saying that in a vacuum? Or is he saying that as a word of God? If he doesn't allow it, who else doesn't allow it? Again, it's not done in a vacuum. He earned his apostleship from Jesus himself. So if he's not allowing a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man in the congregation, then that's what God has already stated. Now, why would that be important here? Now, I talked a little bit about my mom. I'm intensely proud of my mom. I'm also painfully aware of my mother's shortcomings. Okay? So don't think that I've put her up on a pedestal that she doesn't belong on. I know what that pedestal is made of. It's not made of granite. Okay? At best, it's sand. She's a human being, and she's had some failures. The thing is all throughout my childhood, whenever we went to church, she never tried to usurp the authority of the men in the congregation. Even though she was a strong, hard-headed, openly spoken female, that was a situation that she thought was important enough to leave it up to the men. And she's always supported me in my efforts in being a Christian man. It says, but to remain quiet. It's easy to start grumbling about these things. But we're going to go into more of the reason. It says in verse 13, for it was Adam who was first created and then Eve. It says, and it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman being quite deceived fell into transgression. How was Eve deceived? What's that?
By the serpent in the garden.
But what did he say?
You shall not die.
Well, certainly you won't die. You know, he only changed that up. God said, if you eat of that tree, what will happen to you? You will die. Okay. Was that true? Spiritually, yes. Well, physically, too. Okay. Most poisons do not act instantly. I'm going to use a very benign form of poison, lead. Will lead kill you? Yeah. You get enough lead in your system, it's going to kill you. Will mercury kill you? Okay. How long does it take for mercury to kill you? Do you know? Years. Is it going to kill you? Absolutely. It's going to kill you. So, Satan, in the form of the serpent, he says, oh, surely you won't die. Is she aware of how poisons work? Sin is the poison. It may not kill you today, but it's going to kill you. It may not kill you instantly, but it's going to kill you. Like that lead or that mercury or that arsenic. You know, my son is a painter, and he's learned how to, he's learned all about the different types of paints, and he's like, certain paints are really dangerous. So if you ever find old tubes of green paint, put them in a jar and discard them, because those old tubes of green paint have arsenic in them. He is very much aware of the poisons that are potentially in the paint. And again, the sin ultimately caused death. it says, because she was deceived, she fell into transgression. Because she fell into transgression, she died. And all creation since that point has died. Now, does that mean, I'm going to pause for a moment here, does that mean that everyone has an inherited Adam and Eve sin? No. Every person sins themselves. We do not inherit sin. Original sin is not a thing.
Romans 5 and Ezekiel 8.
Romans 5 and Ezekiel 8, that's right. One more verse. But women shall be preserved through the bearing of children if they continue in faith and love and sanctity with self-restraint. Thank God for the women. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here. But also, we have to understand the responsibility that each and every woman has to the congregation. Thank you very much for your time.